prior to my getting a digital camera. Whoops. So a lot of those, I don't have photos of a lot of those birds. So I'm just going to stick with the ones I have photos of. And we're going to start at the very bottom, South Georgia Island, way out in the ocean, on the bottom part of the screen on the right. And then I was on a expedition cruise ship of 55 passengers. We went from Antarctica to South Georgia, and then over the Falkland Islands, and then to the further to the west of Tierra del Fuego, on the very bottom of South America. I'll then take you up north into northeastern Argentina, and then over to northwestern Argentina, which is very, very different. And then up into Paraguay, where I've led quite a few tours in the past. And then further north into Bolivia, where I recently had tours with wonderful Jose Padilla, who's also a person I work with for Peru trips, and he's great. And then from there, we'll have a few spots I'll point out in Bolivia, and then we'll go into Peru, only highlighting a couple locations. And I'll have a lot more in next year after Jose and I do a fantastic tour to northern Peru to see a lot of ultra rare birds and endemics up there as well. Then we go up to Ecuador, southern Ecuador, and then northern Ecuador, pretty different sets of birds. And then into Colombia, where I've started leading tours this last year and a half to several spots. And then over to the east to Guyana, where I did a tour in 2019. All right, well, let's get started. Oops. Sorry. All right, birding at the bottom, South Georgia Island. This is a subantarctic island. It's pretty rugged. A lot of snow even in the midsummer, and there's a lot of really special birds there, but two of them in particular, the South Georgia pipit, is only found on this island. And recently it's been protected by rat poisoning project and mouse poisoning project. We had invasive rats and mice from European ships, from the old whaling ships, that pretty much devastate a lot of some of the smaller birds on the island. And so a very successful eradication happened in the last few years. And so the South Georgia pipit is now expanding its range and its population, which is really great. The other bird that's only found here is the South Georgia pintail. And it's an interesting bird, and it's the only carnivorous duck in the world, in that it eats dead carcasses of whales and seals and birds. So it's a pretty interesting bird. And they're pretty common on the island. And this is the only vegetation that you really see much of is this big tussock grass. And it's also the home for the elephant seals, or the sea lions, climb up on these tufts. And so from there, we head over to the west towards the Falkland Islands, and big seabird colonies. Nothing unique to these islands in the seabird group, but it is spectacular for seabirds. And it's certainly, one of the highlights. But there are some endemic species, and one of them is the Falkland steamer duck. And you'll notice they're really short wings, and you have to go to the Falkland Islands to see this bird because it is flightless. So it's incapable of flying. So you have to come here to get it. And pretty confiding bird. And the striated caracara, which is only found in the southern tip of Tierra del Fuego, in areas where it's very, very difficult to get to, but they're also common on the Falkland Islands. And the local name is Johnny Rook. And it's one of the few carnivorous, well, there are some other carnivorous birds out here too. The peregrine falcons, and then some of the giant petrels are also carnivorous. And one of the birds I really wanted to see, you have to get on the Falkland Islands. The big islands have rats and mice, so they pretty much wiped out a lot of the little birds. So in order to see the small land birds that are endemic to the area, you have to go to only a handful of these small rat-free or predator-free islands. And so we only had a few hours on this one, so I was really nervous about getting this bird and some other birds. And as we pulled up on our Zodiacs coming off the ship, it was right there to greet us. So it was within seconds of a landing that this Blackish Synclodes was there. And also there was the Cobb's wren, which is also endemic to this island, just right on the beach. So I breathed a big sigh of relief, and I was able to enjoy the rest of my time on the island without being nervous about missing anything. Then we headed west towards the Tierra del Fuego, and this is a small city of Ushuaia, which is a tourist town. There's a really beautiful national park here. There's a little ski resort, and it's also where all the cruise ships leave when they go down to the Antarctic Peninsula. So huge amount of tourism, wonderful food, etc., and just beautiful mountains, and tons and tons of birds. And here's a white-throated caracara, and this is one of the best places in the world to see this species. It can be difficult to find. It's in areas which are hard to access, and you can see on the range map. And in fact, this was taken in the national park, but the place where most people get their lifer is at the dump, the landfill. And another special bird here is a Magellanic woodpecker. Also, you can see them in Chile in some of the old growth forests, rainforests. But Ushuaia is a really good place to see it. There's a campground, and there's a pair that hangs around the campground. Fairly easy to see. Spectacular bird. It's huge, related to the ivory-billed woodpecker. And then another bird, which is difficult to get because it's a high elevation species. It's called the white-bellied seed snipe. And seed snipe, this is a big one. It's their ecological equivalents to ptarmigan, which you might know if you've been up to Alaska or northern Canada, or the Rocky Mountains. It's a high alpine. This is a high alpine species, and very, very difficult to access. But at Ushuaia, there's the ski resort. So in summertime, they keep the trams, the chairlifts going, so you can get on the chairlift and go up the mountain without having to climb up, and look around for this bird, the white-bellied seed snipe. Pretty fancy. And seed snipe are related to, they're in the shorebird order, so related to shorebirds, even though they look like grouse or chickens. And this is the hardest seed snipe to find. Another special bird when you go up the ski lodge, up the mountain, is a yellow-bridled finch. This also can be a difficult bird to find in the area, and it has a very similar distribution to the white-bellied seed snipe as well. So pretty cool looking bird. And it's closely related to the Gough finch, which is found on Gough Island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Very, very similar. All right. So from there, we head up into northern Argentina. And this is the famous Ibarra Marshes, and the national park here. And here's our group, and looking for lots of cool birds and mammals. One of them is the yellow cardinal, which is oops, sorry. Even you can see the range map there. It looks like it has a fairly big distribution. It used to have a much larger distribution, but even within that range, it's very, very rare. It's captured by the pet trade, and so that's done a huge number on their population. They're very, very difficult to find, and also habitat destruction as well. And the male is on the left and the female is on the right. And it's such a rare bird that I've had world-class bird tour leaders ask me exactly where I saw this bird, because they're taking groups into Argentina and they want to find out exactly where this bird is because it's so difficult to get. Another bird, you can see the range there is very spotty, and even within those large areas of its range, it's very, very localized and fairly rare. It's the black and white monjita, and monjitas are these weird flycatchers that are in southern South America. There's about 6 or 7 species off the top of my head, and this is a spectacular looking one, and it's the rarest of them, most difficult to see. And these are found in grasslands. And grasslands in South America, as well as many other places in the world, native grasslands are highly threatened or endangered from cattle grazing, introduction of exotic grasses, and also burning. A lot of local people love to burn the grasslands to regenerate the growth, and often they'll burn up bird nests and baby birds along the way. So these are found in preserve areas. This is in a national park. Another one of the rare grassland birds is strange-tailed tyrant. And you can see on the range map, tiny little range. It used to be much more widespread. It's now only found in a few spots in Argentina and a few spots in Paraguay, and that's it. Just a handful of sites. And this is a young male. I have a photo later of an adult male. And we saw this bird near the Ibarra marshes as well. So it's pretty neat to see 3 highly endangered species fairly close together in one morning. And this is sort of what the native grassland looks like. This is a very large ranch that was purchased by a member of the Royal Air Force who left England after World War I. He was fed up with Europe and the war and the carnage, and took his family to northern Argentina. And his grandchildren run this huge ranch right now, and they set a fairly large percentage of the ranch as a nature reserve, which is really fantastic. You can see a lot of really interesting animals in the patches of forest and also in these native grasslands. And one of the really special birds is the ochre-breasted pipit, which is just absolutely stunning, which is golden color. If you look in the books, it doesn't look like this at all. Even I've seen photographs, it doesn't even look like close to this, the beauty of this bird. Kind of reminds me of a cross between a LeConte sparrow and a pipit. And you can see in the range map above, it's highly fragmented areas. Even within those little patches, there's only a few sites. Some of them are only a single site, because again, it's a grassland bird. It's highly threatened, highly endangered habitat, and very difficult to find. We had to spread out with our whole group and walk in a line, and we found one, and it was very confiding. You can walk right up to it, but it's a vast amounts of habitat you have to check to find one. Then we go a little bit north, still in northeastern Argentina, into these forests, these beautiful forests, almost like Dr. Seuss trees, Araucaria forests. And there are some specialty birds found in the Araucaria. But one of them, which is highly threatened, is the vinaceous breasted parrot. There's thought to be only a few hundred left. And you can see that range. There's some, looks like the range goes into Paraguay a little bit, but they're pretty much gone from there. And there's a couple little sites in Argentina. There's a little lip right here is Argentina, and this is Brazil. And they're pretty much gone for most of this area in Brazil. They're captured for the pet trade and also loss of habitat. So we were very, very fortunate. We saw a flock of about 30 in this Chinese pastiche tree, which is an exotic tree. And then they were eating the nuts, the fruits. And so we saw a fairly large percentage of the population that still is in the Argentina area in one morning. The lovely Iguazu Falls is highlights the beautiful rainforest in the area. It's part of the Brazilian Atlantic rainforest, which is almost gone from Brazil, but still there's a big chunk left in Argentina. And here we look for the saffron toucanet, which the Argentines and the Brazilians believe will go extinct in the next couple of decades. It's a rainforest bird, highly threatened, loss of habitat, but also even within the habitat, it's declining, and no one really knows why it's declining, but it is declining. And so even saving habitat may not save this bird. But it's the ultimate banana bird. It's totally unique in the toucans, and that's just this orange, yellow, and pretty cool. And it's the first one I've ever seen, even though I've been in areas where they occur many times. So I was pretty happy. Another really special bird, and you can see in the range map, only found a few spots and these national park areas, and it's black-throated piping guan. And guans and curassows are heavily hunted. They're fairly large game birds. They're very easy to hunt. They're very confiding. And so as soon as hunters go in an area or roads are built through rainforest, these are some of the first birds to go. And therefore they're highly threatened. And even within they're not national parks, their numbers are in low density and they're hard to find. But just a spectacular, almost turkey-sized bird. And we saw this right outside of Iguazu Falls in the national park, where they're fairly regular to see. You go there early enough in the morning. Oops. All right. Then we take the long flight across the country over to northwestern Argentina into the foothills of the Andes. And this is a very dry area. We're looking for some special birds here, including this subspecies, the olive crown crescent chest, which is probably a distinct species. It's found in only a really small area in the southernmost part of its range in central or northern Argentina. And so it's a little bit duller, and this is what the dominant subspecies looks like. And their songs are totally different. Which is a good indication that they are a distinct species. This is also a very difficult bird to photograph. Photographed this with my friend Jose Padilla in Bolivia this last summer. This is the nominate subspecies. And also in the area, there are rivers, and this is in an area called the Yungas. And the Yungas is this kind of a dry forest to wet cloud forest in this very narrow elevation zones in the lower Andes that extends from northern Argentina up into central or maybe northern Bolivia. But there are some species that don't even get up into Bolivia. And one of them is found along this river here, this creek. And it is the rufous-throated dipper. And here you can see the range. There are apparently 1 or 2 streams where they're found in Bolivia, but 99% of the birds are in this little tiny range in Argentina. And it's one of 5 species of dippers in the world. So if you want to see all 5, you have to go to this one area to get it. It's pretty cool. This is banded. It's in the national park. There are researchers studying this species here. And another really cool bird is the Andean sharp-tailed stream creeper, which may be a distinct species. Apparently the vocalization is very similar. As you can see on the range map on the right, you can see this narrow little elevation zone area on the Andes from northern Argentina up into Colombia and a little bit on the Guyana Shield. And then a completely different population is in the lowlands in hill country in eastern Paraguay and southern Brazil, Uruguay area. And they look very different. Here's the one in the lowlands in the Atlantic forest area. So that big ice stripe and really white underneath compared to this. And this bird is sort of a mythical bird for a lot of people. It took me, this is the first one I'd ever seen. I've spent many months looking for them throughout the Andes and in Ecuador and in Peru. Very difficult to get. I'm sure Jose Padilla probably knows of some spots, but man, I could never find one. But finally saw it on this trip. And then this is actually the Atlantic forest bird is actually fairly easy to see along streams in Iguazu Falls area and other spots. They're fairly common and easy to see. Another bird in this region in the Yungas is a Tucumán parrot. And this is a planted pine, exotic pine plantation. And it's also serves as the nighttime roost for most of the world's population of Tucumán parrots. Tucumán parrot used to be fairly widespread, as you can see on the range map here, kind of in the Yungas up into central Bolivia, down about a quarter of the way down Argentina. But it was heavily impacted by the pet trade. Tens of thousands of birds would be captured and exported, and to the point where they were just almost down to very few birds left, just a few hundred or maybe a couple thousand left. And so this local in this village where this plantation is started a conservation group and to protect this bird, and it's now been listed by CITES as illegal to own or export or import, and so they really cut down the pet trade. I'm sure there's still some illegal pet trade going on, but the tens of thousands of birds being removed, that's no longer the case. And so we have him to thank. His name's Amerigo, I believe, and got to meet him actually. Really nice guy. And this is what they look like up close. You see a really charismatic looking parrot. And this is what some of the wetter forest looks like in the cloud forest, oak trees, and just beautiful. And one of the species which is endemic to the Argentine part of the Yungas, you can see on the range map there, little tiny range. This is yellow-striped brushfinch. Pretty bird. And brushfinches there's a lot of different species, a lot of speciation. There's like little isolated pockets, brushfinches throughout the Andes, and a lot of areas have their own distinct species, endemic to small regions. And here's another guan that's protected in this national park. And again, it's a little bit in Argentina and goes over the border into Bolivia, but it's only found in this Yungas habitat. And we were very, very lucky. We missed it. The one day we spent here, and then we drove further up north into the high Andes. And on the way back, we had one last ditch effort. We spent hours and hours looking for it. And then right at dusk, it was right next to the road. And this is, I didn't even have to crop this photo. So it was a spectacular find for just before sunset, the red-faced guan. And this is another little special bird, the white-browed tapaculo, as you can see on the range map, only found in Argentina in this Yungus habitat. But this is even more special. It's in the Santa Barbara subspecies, which is found in this little tiny isolated little mountain range just to the east of the Andes itself. So it's not actually part of the Andes. And we were up there in the cloud forest up on top. We played the tape of the normal white-browed tapaculo, the one that's widespread, had no response at all. And then we played the tape, the calls of the local subspecies, and it immediately came right out in the open, and we got fantastic photos. And tapaculos are mostly identified by calls and songs. That's how they're differentiated. So this is probably a distinct species, the Santa Barbara white-browed tapaculo. It's a tiny, tiny range. And if you know tapaculos, they are extremely difficult to photograph. So we went higher and higher up in the Andes. This is at over 15,000 feet, and we're walking around. This is actually snow and ice in this wet, boggy area to look for a very, very special bird called the diadem sandpiper plover. And this is a juvenile. We actually had 2 juveniles. We did not see an adult, unfortunately. But you can see the range is fairly big. It's not really big, but they are only found in the high mountains in bogs. But even within that range, they're very sparsely distributed, very patchily distributed. There's a lot of habitat where they just do not exist. So they're very rare and difficult to find. You have to go to special spots where people have seen them before and hope for the best, because you can wander around lots of bogs and never see one. So we were pretty lucky on this trip. The diadem sandpiper plover. Another bird that's high in the high altiplano and the high Andes and these big lakes is the rarest of the coots. This is the horned coot, and which is in decline. It's endangered in a lot of areas. They've no longer in lakes where they used to be. And so this is the last coot I needed for my life list, and I have all the world's coots, which is wonderful. And they have these little horn sections come off the top of their head here. Another bird which is really spectacular and very, very you can see the range here. Looks large, but within that range there are only a few little dots where they actually occur, and they almost always occur around little villages. And we pulled up to this little village, and it's the first bird I saw. So extremely lucky. We didn't see another one on the whole trip. And it's called the Moreno's ground dove, or bare-eyed ground dove. So really, really hard to get bird, and you had to go to the right spots to get it. All right. So we left kind of the high Andes, and there's plenty more good birds in all these places where we've gone through already, but we have a lot of ground to cover. So we're going to the area around Buenos Aires to look for grassland bird, the Hudson's canastero, which I missed on my first trip there 12 years ago. So I was really happy to see this bird this time. And it's a grassland bird. So again, grassland habitats are highly threatened in the area. And even within that large range there, if you do find patches of habitat, they are common, but finding the suitable habitats can be difficult. And so fancy bird, named after William Hudson, who, who's Hudson? He was a English author who wrote Green Mansions, and he was also an avid ornithologist, and this is named after him. There's a happy group leaving, having seen the Canistero and leaving Argentina. Okay, next on to Paraguay. Paraguay is one of my favorite countries. I love it, and it's divided into basically 3 habitats. On the western third is the dry Chaco, and this is the dry Chaco. It's a kind of a semi-desert thorn forest, similar to West Mexico. And then in the middle third is the humid Chaco, which is palms, savanna, a lot of marshes, and then much more luxurious small statured forest, and pretty different birds. And then the eastern third used to be all Atlantic rainforest, but now it's mostly soybeans and wheat and other crops, and heavily deforested in the last 40 years. But with that, there are some really cool birds. This is a saffron-cowled blackbird, critically endangered species. Even though it looks like it has a large range in that map, there are very, very few places where they actually occur. So we're very lucky. I've seen them in one location in Paraguay and one in Argentina, and that's it. Very, very difficult, but beautiful bird. And critically endangered. They're declining. They don't know really why. There's loss of habitat, but there's some other factors that might be involved that they're not sure of. Here's another critically endangered bird. The cock-tailed tyrant is a little grassland bird. And again, grassland birds are highly threatened. You can see a big swath of area in Paraguay. There's only one spot actually where they occur in Paraguay. We saw them in this one little spot where they still occur, and they may be gone now. Actually, I heard that they may be gone, may be extirpated from the entire country. And there's a spot where Jose and I saw them in Bolivia this last summer, right around in here. But there are very few spots actually where they occur within this area in Brazil. So critically endangered bird and disappearing. And here's another strange-tailed tyrant. This is the adult male, and I showed you a mature male earlier from Argentina. And there are a few areas in Paraguay where we see them fairly regularly. Pretty fancy bird, and I think they're gone from Brazil as well. So you have to go to a little bit of Paraguay and a little bit of Argentina, and that's it. And you can see on the range map, there's 4 little dots: Brazil, northern Bolivia, and 2 little spots in Paraguay where the white-winged nightjar still occurs. And I've seen them. This was taken actually in the center spot here in Paraguay, and they may actually be gone from that site now. But extraordinarily rare bird. Even sites where they're found, the habitat's very, very small patches, and so the populations must be extremely tiny. And here's an Atlantic rainforest bird, which with the range map looks like it's doing pretty well. A lot of area for it to cover, but again, it's restricted to virgin Atlantic forest, and there's very little of that left. And even within the habitat where that still exists, the species is becoming rarer and rarer, and it's declining, and no one knows why it's declining. It's kind of a big mystery. So I finally found this on my 4th trip to Paraguay, and I have not seen it in Argentina. So I'm very, very lucky to have seen this bird. the white-browed woodpecker, and it's kind of a weird name because it actually has a yellow brow, but the official name is white-browed. And then over in the eastern part this is Paraguay right here, and this is the eastern part, or the western part. This is the dry Chaco, and this is probably the only area where the species is left. There are a few spots where maybe they could still be found in Argentina, but apparently a lot of Argentina birders go to Paraguay to try to see this bird. And there's only maybe less than a handful of records for Bolivia. So this is sort of they thought maybe they could occur here because the habitat's here, but very, very, very rare bird, very low density. The habitat's being wiped out. The Chaco, dry Chaco in Argentina is being converted to soybeans and cattle ranching, and also cattle ranching in western Paraguay as well. Paraguay is the fastest deforestation in the world, fastest deforestation rates. And so there are protected areas, but we don't know if it's going to be enough to save this bird, because they do like larger trees, and the larger trees are used for wood for building, because in the Chaco there are very few large trees there. They're more like shrubs or kind of little thorn forest trees. So special bird. The last trip I went on in Paraguay, we were really lucky to see this one. My buddy Oscar Rodriguez, who lives in Paraguay and is one of the leading experts, had only seen them I think twice before in his life. So pretty spectacular, and it's related to the pileated woodpecker. Another bird, the Chaco owl. I always love big owls, and also loss of habitat is pretty much wiped it out from most areas within that range. But we go to this one ranch, which has a guest stay. So we stay at the ranch, bring groups there, and it takes us between 10 and 30 seconds to find this bird at the ranch, because they're right in the parking lot, the pair. So pretty easy to see, and just spectacular birds, about the size of a spotted owl or barred owl. So pretty neat. All right, so on to Bolivia. This is Los Volcanes Reserve, spectacular area. And our first stop after we go to fly into Santa Cruz, and this is our group at the Barba Azul, and it's out in the middle of nowhere in northern Bolivia, out in the lowlands, kind of where the grasslands and marshes meet patches of Amazonia forest. And this was created, here's patches of forest, the big lake, and this is our lodges, and it's a research center as well. It's where the blue-throated macaw occurs, and it's related to the blue and yellow macaw, but it's different, and it's a little bit smaller and has that big blue throat. And you can see the range here, which is kind of a misnomer. It's actually a little dot is where 75% of the world's population lives, which is this reserve. And here's a close-up. We saw lots of them. We saw 75% of the world's population here in 2 days, something like that. And it's also a really good spot for the blue and yellow macaws. Lots and lots of hundreds of those as well. Lovely spot, beautiful birds, birding. Orinoco goose, which is heavily hunted because it is a goose, and it lives along the rivers, and that's where people live in the Amazonia areas. They live along rivers. So it's heavily hunted, extirpated from a lot of its range. And this reserve is probably one of the best places on the planet to see this species. And here's a cocktail tyrant, which I showed earlier. And this is one of the other locations where you can see one. these highly endangered birds. Bolivia is famous for its two endemic macaw species, the blue-throated, and this one is the red-fronted. And notice the habitat's quite a bit different. Very dry, semi-desert area, and those cliffs are where the macaws nest. And there's this beautiful little lodge right there on the other side of the river where we stayed in. And this is the red-fronted macaw. There's only a few hundred left. And a lot of people think it's the most beautiful of all the macaws, and I tend to agree. And here's the distribution, this little tiny little area in these little dry inter-Andean valleys. And here's another photo of them. And we saw quite a few at this location. It's pretty neat. And here we are again, kind of this dry areas in the foothills of the Andes, or mid-elevation zone in the Andes. And this is where the Cochabamba mountain finch lives. The only place in the world, well, actually this little spot here, which I didn't even know about, this is the Cochabamba Valley. And just along the edge of the valley, coming up along the ravines, the dry ravines, is where you can get this spectacular species about the size of a grosbeak. And it's just a knockout. And we only saw one. We spent hours in this area. And then we get further up into the Andes to La Paz, and we go over the north side down slope on, this is called the Death Road. And people say, oh, because it's the most dangerous road to travel on, but there's a new highway, so there's very little traffic, and it's really called the Death Road. Is during the Bolivian military dictatorship after World War II. This is where they would dump bodies of political prisoners over the edge because they can never be recovered because it's so steep. So along the road, there are little memorials for with names of people who they thought were tossed over the edge. But it is spectacular. It's cloud forest, tons of birds. Amazing. There's Jose in the middle of the road. And one of the ones I really wanted to see is this orange-browed hemisphingus with a very narrow elevational range, because the Andes are so steep that to be, in a habitat of, let's say, 1,500 meters to 2,000 meters, there's actually very little acreage within that because it's so steep. So the ranges of a lot of these birds are extremely narrow, and this is one of those birds. So just fantastic. This is in the tanager family, and glowing in the dark in the clouds. All right, we're gonna leave there. Got a lot more to cover and head up to Lake Titicaca. I did not take a photo of Lake Titicaca. I don't know why I didn't take a photo when I was there. So I got this online, which I hate to do, but it was not copy protected, so I did it. And it's a huge lake, and it's way high elevation above most kind of the tree line area. So a lot of exotic trees are here, a lot of scrubby habitat. And it is the place to see the Titicaca grebe, which is also a flightless bird, and it's only found in Lake Titicaca and two other high elevation lakes south of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, and that were probably linked at some point, thousands of years ago during the wetter era. But really, really fancy bird. It is in decline due to getting caught in fishermen's nets, and they drown. So at one point they thought there were 10,000, and then a more recent estimate is 2,000 birds left, and that was a while ago, so there may be fewer now. So it is a really special bird to try to see and protect. And nearby, in this little tiny little little range, kind of more like a hill range between Lake Titicaca and the high Andes, is the only spot in the world to see this bird, the Burlepsis canistero. And you can see this little range right here, right near the Peruvian border. Tiny little range. Must be a tiny population of birds because there's not a lot of habitat there. It's mostly grazed over. And the Burlepsis canistero. All right, off to Peru. Well, as I mentioned before, most of my Peru rare birds have been, I saw back in the 80s and early to mid 90s. And so before I had a camera. So I can't show you photos of those birds. So we're going to stick to one little trip that I did. And this is a bog. If you go from Lima and cross over the Andes, due east, if you go on one of the little side roads, this is a famous bog for the diadem sandpiper plover, which I mentioned before, although I've been here 4 times, I've not seen one. But it is also special for this other bird, which I spent 4 times, and the 4th time was a charm. It's a white-bellied Synclodes. And you can see this narrow little elevation, there's tiny little mountain range, but even within this range, they're only found in a few bogs. They're thought to be, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred left or so, something like that. And this is a huge Synclodes. It's about the size of a jay, and just fantastic, spectacular bird. I'm so happy to see it. Because of course, when you're walking around there, you're invariably you will get altitude sickness because you're up at 16,000 feet or something like that. And we saw that bird on the way to this other high mountain lake called Lake Junin, which is this fairly large lake, but it's in central Peru. And it's the only place in the world to see the Junin grebe, which is also flightless. And here's our guide for the Junin rail, which is related to the black rail, which is only found in the marshes around this lake. So I've been to this lake once before, but I didn't know how to get a boat, and I couldn't see the grebe from the shore, so I didn't see it. But this trip, we had our guide take us out on the boat, and you actually get into the middle of the lake in order to see this. This is a Junin grebe, and a little bit different from the silvery grebe, a little bit bigger, a little bit longer build, but very similar. And we saw many silver grebes before we finally found the endangered Junin grebe, which is declining in this population. I think the water quality of the lake is in decline due to, I think, some sort of industrial waste. You see this little dot on the map, and this is where you got to go to see it. Tiny little dot just east of Lima. And here's the Junin black rail, which you got to see. So just a fantastic little spot. And there's other birds there as well, of course. And then next, just a quick little trip. There's other birds I can mention here, but the only one I mentioned is the slender-billed finch, which is in decline, habitat destruction of native habitat. And you can see here, it's only found in these little riparian areas and little dry valleys coming off the Andes in the along the coast of Peru, southern Peru, and northernmost Chile. And a lot of these areas are converted to agriculture. This is a very dry desert. Almost never rains there. And so this bird is in decline. I was lucky to see it on my 3rd attempt to see this bird, the slender-billed finch. Okay, now off to Ecuador. In Ecuador, we've got a lot more because I've been spending more time there in recent years. And this is on taking a boat way up this river to this little lodge, Playa de Oro, and in this lowland rainforest on the Pacific lowlands of northwestern Ecuador. So there's some really special birds here. Lowland forests in the Pacific Choco region, which extends from near the Panamanian border of Colombia down to northwestern Ecuador. There's a lot of habitat destruction. It's very difficult to find virgin forest, but this is a place to go to get it. And one of the spectacular birds is the five-colored barbet. You can see we had it in Ecuador right here. There's a couple little spots so you can see them. A lot of this area here in the Choco in Colombia is off limits. It's very difficult to get there, or you can't get there. Areas where you can get to, the habitat's destroyed. So really special bird. Another one, which is really, really rare, even within its range, is the Choco woodpecker, very low density. Extremely lucky to see this bird. In fact, our Mauricio Ruano, my Ecuador guide, was extremely happy to see it. And he told me that all the other Ecuadorian guides want to know exactly where we saw this bird, because it is almost impossible to try to show tourists when you're guiding. The Choco woodpecker. And there's not eye candy. It's not necessarily a rare bird, but it is a special one found in the Choco in this endangered habitat, the scarlet and white tanager. And this is a bird in the higher elevation, the cloud forest, very small range, a lot of habitat destruction within its range, so very patchily distributed. And it's a hoary puffleg, which is a little hummingbird. Another lowland bird, the Sapayoa, which right now is regarded as its own member of its own species, only one member of its species, unrelated to anything else. DNA studies suggest that it's related to the broadbills, which are only in Africa and Asia, nowhere else, so not in the Western Hemisphere at all. So very difficult bird to find, very inobtrusive, and we saw this in the lowlands. Another highly endangered bird because of loss of habitat is the scarlet-breasted dacnus, and pretty much only found in the northwest corner of Ecuador. And it is one of the more spectacular colored birds that you can see down there. So fortunately, there are reserves in the lowlands, and you just have to be lucky to see them. As well as the splendid woodpecker, which is a subspecies of the crimson-bellied, and some people regard it as a distinct species. Also found in that same range, and only in old-growth forests, and it's the first one I've ever seen. So pretty spectacular bird. And the yellow-green tanager, also kind of a cloud forest, difficult bird to find, rare anywhere in its habitat. Even within that range, they're very spottily distributed and not found throughout that narrow little range. Only a few locations where you can see this bird. And here we go to the famous Refugio paz, and this is named after Angel Paz. Angel was the one who invented worm feeders for ant pittas, and he's a farmer and just sort of got interested in some of the birds on his farm in western Ecuador. And here he is in the middle. It's Ken Rosenberg on the left, a famous ornithologist from Cornell, who's one of my best friends and co-leader on a lot of my trips, and Angel in the middle. And Angel discovered the giant ant pitta, which was when I spent a lot of time in Ecuador in the late 80s and early 90s, no one knew the call. The song, the vocalizations of giant ant pitta was unknown. And Angel was the one who basically discovered this bird on his farm, thought it was interesting, and started feeding it worms and named it Maria. So he'd go out to this one spot, he'd make a little clearing, and every day he'd put little worms, little mealworms out, and he'd call Maria, Maria, and Maria would come in and feed on the worms. So this is Maria is like the 5th or 6th generation of Maria. And so a lot of natural history information has come from this. about the giant ant pit, which is basically unknown to birders and science, other than some old specimens collected in the 1800s. So this is where you go to see the giant ant pitta, and he also has figured out or brought in several other ant pitta species as well. So you can see five species of ant pittas on his farm in one morning, going to different feeding stations. So it's pretty neat bird. And since then, people have used this technique to locate other extremely difficult to find ant pittas throughout the South America, the Andes. And we're going to go for a little bit, venture a little bit farther south, still at the southernmost part of this Choco rainforest on the Pacific slope of Ecuador in Buenaventura. And this area is protected because, and here we are in southern Ecuador. This is Guayaquil is up here, the tiny little spot. And this is all big preserve now, because this is where the El Oro parakeet was discovered and wasn't described to science until 1988. And I happened to be at this spot 2 months after it was published. So I got to see this bird right when it was brand new. And since then, there's this reserve there, and they put nest boxes. They nest in cavities, so they put nest boxes, and protecting the birds from poachers, etc., and protecting the habitat, which is critical. And so the bird is doing fairly well. You can see them if you go to this reserve, along with the long-wattled umbrella bird, which is seriously endangered. Very few places where you actually come and see this bird. It's a spectacular crow-sized species, and it's in the Cotinga family, and very difficult to find. It's hunted because it is a fairly large bird, and so you go to this reserve and actually see this bird. Okay, we go a little bit further south and a little bit further inland, and we get into more of a drier habitat. And there's some special birds here, and one of them is a buff-fronted owl. And you can see crazy distribution, these little spots here and there, down here, and within each area, they're almost a mythical bird. It's like it's only until the last 2 or 3 years where most birders, including a lot of international tour leaders, are actually getting their lifers. People who have been spending decades in South America have never seen this bird until recently. Now we kind of figured out where they are, and that they're not that rare. They're not that enigmatic. Even like in Paraguay here, you can see this, half of Paraguay is in the distribution, but there are only maybe a couple records, something like that. And some of these places they're like, oh, there's an old record, someone found one out in the middle of nowhere and just got lucked into it. But now we kind of got an idea of what they sound like and where to find them. And I photographed this one a couple of years ago. So pretty amazing. And here's the habitat, which is beautiful forest. Well, actually, there's quite a few birds in this area, but none of them are exceptionally rare. They're also found in Peru, etc. So I'm going to skip and go north to the Papayatka Pass, which is due east of Quito. And the rufous belly sea snipe. I put Ecuadorian because it's a different subspecies and it looks really different. And you can see the range. There's one little area right here near Quito, and then one area near Chimborazo Mountain, the volcano, and that's it. And so it's probably a different species. It's totally disjunct population. It's a high elevation species, and there's no high elevation habitat anywhere in a lot of this area here. So there's no way they can have any kind of gene flow. And again, they look different from the main population. So if you go up to the Papayatka Pass and drive up to the radio antennas, and if you're lucky enough to have not overly foggy day or cloudy day, you'll likely see this bird. And again, they're about the size of the ptarmigan. And going downslope to the eastern east side of the Andes is this lodge called San Isidro, and it has this owl here that looks halfway between a black and white owl, which is a west slope species, and or did I get that right? Or black banded owl on the east side, and so they don't know if it's a distinct species or if it's a hybrid. For some reason, black and white owl came crossed over the Andes, which is highly doubtful, and bred with black banded owl. But anyways, this is a San Isidro owl. It's probably a distinct species, but has not been formally described yet. And you can see it right at the lodge. And so we're going to head down south a little bit more to this place called the Hokotoka area, where there's a new lodge built in the far south in the high mountains, where Bob Ridgely and several other people were walking around, and they heard this weird call. They didn't know what the hell it was, and they taped it and played it back, and out popped the Hokotoka antpitta, which took them by surprise because it's a completely new species, completely distinct from any other antpitta. And of course, they've created this little feeding station here, which is covered because it often rains. And here we are waiting for the Hokotoka antpitta to come in, and here he is getting his worms. And the only place where you can see it on the planet, although I heard that they have been found just across the board. This is Ecuador here, and the Peruvian border, and I've heard that they have been found just right over in here in Peru. And it's also that same lodge is a great place to see the bearded guan, which is a highly fragmented habitat, and of course they're heavily hunted, so it's a great place to see it. A little bit further to the left, to the west of this area is one of the more amazing finds in recent years. This is a new reserve for this special bird. This is the habitat of the blue-throated hill star, which was discovered, I think it was 2018 or 2017. And there's a road that goes right up there. Birders hadn't really gone up there to go birding. And some birders went up there, local, Ecuadorian birders, and they found this thing. It's like, oh my God, this is completely different from any other hill star. It's got a green crown and a blue throat. And
Hi there.
Turns out it was a distinct species.
Are you alone? Well, I'm actually viewing a exposition of birds in South America.
And then
it's I don't.
All right, so you can see that it doesn't even have a range map yet, but this is from the eBird. This is basically this one spot right here where you get it.
Yeah.
And all right, so then we cross back over to look for this other really special bird called the orange-throated tanager. And locals created this preserve with the World Land Trust. And here's the habitat, beautiful. This is kind of these little outlier hills east of the main Andean range, and really lush. And here's the orange-throated tanager, spectacular bird, only member of its genus. And you can see the range here. It's a little fragmented in the Peru side, and there's one little spot on Ecuador, and this is where we were to see this bird. But a lot of deforestation here, and there's a lot of this area is really difficult to access. So this is the one spot to get this bird. The best spot. And then here is, we're looking at most of the world's range of another species of bird, which is basically this little hillside here, this little valley here, and this little up here. And where almost the entire world population lives of the pale-headed brush finch. And you can see the range map here is a big oblong thing, but it's actually a little dot, the tiniest dot you can have on a map. And this thought bird had not been seen since the 1960s until it was rediscovered in late 1990s at this location, this farm. And people freaked out. Like, oh my God, they bought the farm, created the preserve. And this is the only place to see it. You have to go to this one spot in this. It's a lot of these reserves are run by the Hokotoko Foundation, which has done a great job with protecting habitat of the most critically endangered species in Ecuador. And also in most areas, they build lodges for birders. So birders can actually go there. They're built for birders, by birders, and just wonderful places to stay. So we try to stay at all the Hokotoko Foundation lodges when we go. This is another very rare parrot, red-faced parrot. Very few, very rare, even within this little fragmented range. And Mauricio knew of a good spot, so he went in and got it. The Spangled Coquette, also you can see fairly large range, but within the range, it's very, very rare. And this is a fancy little hummingbird. And we went to this one little spot out here in eastern Ecuador, right around in here, a little spot where you can get them. There's a little hummingbird garden. You pay a little bit of money, put it in the jar, and then they maintain these. They're not hummingbird feeders, but they're really good flowers. And there's always Spangled Coquette there. Another super range restricted species, hummingbird, is a violet-throated. And there's also in this one little area, Las Cajas National Park, in one little spot in Ecuador. And it's a kind of high elevation species. And you have to go there to get it. Okay, off to Colombia. Here we are with the man who rediscovered a bird that was only known from 3 specimens collected in the early 1970s. And it was formally described to science in 2007. And so never been seen alive by people, birders, ornithologists. And so there was expeditions sent out to the area where they were collected in the 1970s to see if they're still there. And they couldn't find them. And they thought, okay, they're extinct. And this gentleman in the middle was, he's a professor at university, and he owns a bunch of land. His family owns farmers and as well. And he went to this conservation meeting, and they're talking about the different birds and how to, protect, create wildlife habitat, etc. And then for a lark, the presenter just said, "Oh, this is the Antiochian brushfinch, and it's extinct." And the guy says, "Oh, no, it's not. I have it on my property." And then he raised, "Oh, no, it's probably just a slaty brushfinch." And he said, No. So they all came over to this farm, and sure enough, there they were. And here it is. And so you get permission to go, and it's this tiny little spot right here, just outside of Medellin, and about an hour and a half outside of Medellin, and just kind of second growth scrubby areas. And you can see the Antiochian brushfinch brought back from the dead. Oh, and he rediscovered this, I think it was in 2018. So it's very, very recent. And here's another bird that you can see, this tiny two little spots in these cloud forest ridges north of Medellin. And they saw this piha. I was like, what the heck is this? Turns out to be a completely new species of science. And this is discovered in the last few years as well. We need a little bit longer, but definitely in the last 30 years for sure. And the chestnut cap piha. So you have to go to these special reserves, and of course there's a lodge there, and trails, and you can stay, and good food, and out on these. It takes a while to get up there because the roads, the dirt roads are pretty bad and windy and slow, but you get there and you can spend a couple of days and you can see the species. Another bird that's also found in some of these areas is the red-bellied grackle, which is a cloud forest bird, highly fragmented and rare, and a spectacular looking thing. And mention this one, the Chami ant pitta. There's very little known about this bird. There isn't even a range map in Birds of the World. This is the eBird areas, and near Hardin, there's a place where locals brought them into a worm feeder, following Angel Paz's directions, and was able to bring the Chami ant pitta in. And this used to be part of the Rufous ant pitta species, but it's all been split. All the subspecies have been split. So this is a very small range and almost unknown natural history. Another area to go to in the Hardin area, which is, you can see this little spot right here, and a couple of spots, is a yellow-eared parrot. It's a very large parakeet with a big yellow cheek. And they used to be widespread throughout the Andes, down into northern Ecuador, but they nest in wax palms, old growth wax palms, and wax palms are cut down every year by the Catholic Church, because they use the fronds for Palm Sunday celebrations, which is a real tragedy for the birds. And so they were extirpated from Ecuador many years ago, and almost went extinct until they were able to start making some preserves and building nest boxes and actively protecting them. So we're lucky to see this. White mantled barbet, also range restricted species in this area of central Colombia, as well as the city ant tanager. And even though it has a large range, a lot of this habitat was destroyed. So you have to go to little spots for them to see this bird, little patches of leftover remaining forest. And the black and gold, which is a cloud forest species only known from a couple areas. And again, habitat destruction has wiped out much of its area. And even within areas of habitat, it still can be fairly rare and fairly hard to find. All right, almost done. Okay, here's a guy in the middle with the glasses right here. He used Angel Paz's technique to bring in another exceptionally rare bird, and this is his son, who's 21, in a bird guide. And this is here we are in this forest south of Bogota, to see the Cundinamarca ant pitta. And you can see the little dot right here. This is basically his farm area, and a little more than just his farm, but very, very tiny area. And he had built a little blind and trained the Cundinamarca ant pitta to come into worms. So we got to see this bird. This was discovered in the early 1990s, but it wasn't until last year where you can actually go and see this bird, because it's been trained to see by the worm feeding. And so very few people had ever seen this bird before last year. So pretty cool. And there's more ag candy. This is a special hummingbird found in the Bogota area, in cloud forest. The blue fronted storefrontlet. All right, going quicker. Inarita on the Orinoco River area in eastern Colombia is the only spot in the world to see the Orinoco softtail. Just right here, there's a little tiny range. Here's the town of Inarita. Here's a Colombian border. The Colombian-Venezuelan border. There's the Orinoco River, a couple little spots, and that's it. So we're lucky to see that. And here's Can Rosenberg again. Here's the habitat along the little tributary of the Orinoco River, where this species was discovered just a few years ago, the Inarita ant shrike. Very distinct looking species, and hasn't been formally described yet. And also is an area for white sand forests. White sand forests are fairly rare in the Amazon basin, and they all have a special species of birds that are only found in white sand forests. And one of them is a brown banded puffbird. In fact, it's not even seen here in this area where we were, but I photographed it right here in Colombia. And so very, very disjunct populations found in these isolated white sand forests. There's another bird who's a white sand specialist, is a Yapacana antbird, very tiny little distribution. Whoops. And very, very difficult to see. Very few people have seen this bird, but you go to this one spot in Inarita and you can see one. Santa Marta Mountains, almost done, folks. The very, very far north of this isolated little mountain right here in far northern Colombia, gets up to 14,000 feet, I believe. And coppery emerald's the toughest emerald to get, toughest hummingbird to get, because they don't come to hummingbird feeders. And there are lots of hummingbird feeders in the area, so the others are easy to get. The Santa Marta bush tyrant only found on the high ridge tops, critically endangered or highly endangered species. We are very lucky to see this bird. A lot of groups miss them. And as well as the Santa Marta parakeet, same distribution, only found on these high ridge tops. And we're very, very special. A lot of groups miss this bird as well. Critically endangered. And here's a easy hummingbird to get because they actually come to hummingbird feeders. Again, only found in Santa Marta Mountain. It's a spectacular white-tailed star frontlet. Guyana, almost done. Here's Cator Falls. And right along the coast, you get the blood-colored woodpecker, specialty of the immediate coastal forest in Guyana, French Guyana, and Suriname. Very tiny distribution. And then this is what most of Guyana looks like, this lowland rainforest. And we get the harpy eagle and the Rufus potu, both species with large distributions, but very difficult to find, especially Rufus potu. Very few people see this bird. There are very few places where you can see them, and almost impossible to just try to find on your own. You have to be extremely lucky. Pretty amazing bird. And then we go farther south into the savanna area of southwestern Guyana, totally different from the rainforest that we were just at, to see the red siskin, which has been heavily hunted or captured for the pet trade. And you can see a few little dots left where there still might be some. And there's one little dot right here in Guyana where it was discovered a few years ago at this one ranch. And we went out to the ranch and we're able to see two of them. So we're very, 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 very happy. And then also near that area along the Rio Blanco, which is the border of Brazil and Guyana, only along this river right here. This range is way too big, should be tiny. Along the riparian is the hoary-throated spine-tail. It's the only place on the planet to see it. The best photo I can get is terrible lighting, but that's what it is. Fancy, and that's it. So I haven't been to Brazil yet, as you probably noticed, or Venezuela, but I plan to be doing that soon at some point. And so I'll have more rare birds to show you. And then northern Peru next March. Jose and I still have 2 spots left. So if you want to join that, go to my website and check it out. And that is it. So, yeah.
Thank you, John. Pretty cool. Oh, to be young and able to walk, I'd be there.
Yeah.
Okay, we got one question in the so far in the chat. Barbara Benson, she says, for how many of these birds when you're showing, is there a serious conservation effort? And if so, and if there is one, who is behind the work?
Well, I mentioned it to for a number of the species, some of the work that's being done, the Hokotoco Foundation is working in Colombia. Ecuador. There's a couple groups and competing groups, local groups in Colombia. And there are groups in Argentina and Paraguay has a national group, and Peru, there's several groups. So there's definitely a lot of work being done, and a lot of highly talented local ornithologists and local bird guides in all these countries who really know their stuff and doing a lot of excellent work. So yeah, all these birds are pretty well known, and there's definitely work being done, or work wanted, people wanting to do work, just depending on funding for most of these species. So yeah. And American Bird Conservancy is a good group. They're kind of an umbrella group, and they kind of work with a lot of these local groups. Bolivia has a group, Harmonia, and they actually run the red fronted macaw reserve, and I think they run the Barba Azul, the blue-throated macaw reserve as well. And they're pretty active in different things, and so I used to spend a lot of time down there in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's radically different now in terms of the amount of areas that have been surveyed, and the quality and number of local birders and ornithologists, and then the sophistication of the conservation. It's just off the charts compared to what it was 30 years ago. So it's just great, and there's more things being found all the time. There's new species or new range extensions being found, and yeah, it's fantastic.
I was thinking as we're watching the different birds coming through, especially where you mentioned local bird watchers, local tour guides, and academic folks. So when is there more receptiveness to conservation efforts when it's coming from the local people rather than some American coming down and saying you got to do this, you got to do that?
Oh yes, of course, and then also ecotourism plays a role as well. Locals realize, it can benefit me economically to have some of these preserves and have this tourist industry. So there's some of that as well. But certainly, yes, grassroots, it's becoming more of a grassroots sort of a conservation rather than a top down from academics or from Americans, Europeans.
Right.
So yeah. And the more I was involved in a training program for National Audubon, their International Alliance, where one of the goals was not just to train guides, but train them to become leaders in conservation and as well. So yeah.
Good deal. Let's see. All right, I think that's it for questions. Boy, that was quite a trip through traveling through your eyes and learning so much, and really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us tonight. And I hope folks will take to heart and see what they can do to if there's any of these groups looking for any sort of support from North American birders, that would be great. But anyway, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Do you have any more comments?
Well, I see a raised hand.
Yeah, Jose, my Peru and Bolivia guy has raised his hand, so I'm sure he can add a lot to what I just said. So, Jose, do you have any?
John, how are you?
Good.
Hi, John. Hi,
Yeah,
John.
hi.
How are you?
Good.
Good. It's excellent to hear you tonight. Excellent to see you again as well.
Thank you.
Well, remember last year we were in Bolivia. We were talking a lot about the new names for the birds that were coming up. I think in October last year. I guess you were using the new names, a lot in this presentation tonight. Is that right, John?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
For the new birds, right? That were coming out in October as well.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
nothing. I
yes,
just
yeah,
wanted
yeah, the
to-
new taxonomy, yes.
The new taxonomy for
Yes.
the birds, right?
Yeah, right, yes.
So that's it basically. It was excellent. Bring me very good memory from last year as well in Bolivia when we were birding there together.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of good birds and I nothing, just to congratulate you for tonight's presentation. And next year we're going up to north of Peru for the scarlet-banded barbet and some of the excellent species up there. So
Marvelous
hope some of the
spatula,
people here can join. Exactly. Hope some of
marvelous
the people
spatula
here can
tail,
join
and
us
long whiskered owlet.
next year.
Yeah.
Exactly, John. Excellent. So all this we're waiting for you and for the people who join us anyway. So great. Thank you, John. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
thanks. All right, take care, buddy.
Thanks, Jose. Well, John, thanks again for a great presentation, and hope we'll see you sometime next year.
Sure.
And thank you to everybody. This is our last presentation till September. So, right, Ken, we'll see everybody September with a new list of great speakers for the year.
Thank you.
John, there's people in the chat who are saying thank you for such a great talk.
Oh, good, thanks. This is kind of an experiment for me because, I'm just jumping around all over the place, just a few birds. But if you go to my website, you could see thousands of birds. I've seen 2,251 species in South America, and I only covered 100. So there's a lot to see.
Yeah, but your stories really add a lot to it, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, folks. We'll see you in September and get some stories that you can maybe put on a show yourselves here. So thank you for coming on this trip with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, so all right. John, thank you. I'm going to end this
Leaving.
now. Bye, Joanne.
Bye, Ken.